Hey everybody, I'm Caston Day, and welcome to another Phillipian tutorial. This tutorial is all about multi-camera editing. So as you can tell, right now I'm shooting with two different cameras, and this tutorial is going to be how to edit that footage and how to do it the fastest way possible, especially inside Premiere Pro. So Premiere has a lot of unique tools and features which enable you to take multiple cameras and multiple different feeds and compile that all into one final product in the fastest way possible. No longer do you have to dink around trying to sync up footage and compile it in a really inefficient way. Now Premiere enables you to do that much faster. And one of the keys to doing this is to make sure that you record audio on all of the cameras that you're using in your shoot. So right now I have two different cameras, but I'm only recording audio that I really care about on one of them. The other one doesn't have great audio, but I'm recording with it nonetheless because that way I can take the footage inside Premiere and I can sync the timeline of the cameras up so that they match using their audio. No longer do I have to try and match it based on what I'm doing in the video, but I can do it seamlessly through the audio. So now with that, let's jump inside Premiere and we can really get going on multi-camera editing. Okay, hey guys, so now we're back inside of Premiere. Let's start by creating a multicam sequence. So here I've already imported my source footage, and this is myself talking to a few different cameras in my room in the middle of the night. And so what we can do is, if these are the two cameras that we know we have as part of our multicam sequence, and these are the only two, we can select both of those, right click, and say create multicam source sequence. Okay, so this brings us to this setup bar, and so first we can name our sequence. I'm going to name it multicam tutorial because that seems fitting. And then this synchronize point might be sent to something else, but what we want to set it to is audio. And so if you've recorded audio on all of your different cameras, then you can record it. Then you can synchronize them this way. And so we're going to choose track channel 1 as our audio. So all of our audio will be coming from track channel 1. You can just leave it that way pretty much all the time. And then pretty much everything else you can leave the same. But really quick, say you didn't record audio with one of your cameras, or it didn't work or something like that, what you can do is you can synchronize with endpoints. So if I come into this and I look at its source file, what I can say is, right when I start talking there, or maybe if I clap my hands, which I think I did at the beginning, maybe on that last clap, right there, you can set your endpoint, and then on the other camera, you can come over and set your endpoint right at that same location. And then once you go in to sync these clips as part of your multi-camera sequence, you can synchronize them with your endpoints. And so those will line the endpoints up, and then your whole thing should be lined up. But we'll just do audio since we know we've recorded audio with both. So it's processing that. If it's a long clip, it might take a little bit more time to process your audio. But you can see that now this has created a new sequence, our source sequence, as you can see with the blue icon there. So we can just drag this into our sequence area. And then this is our source. And then this is our multicam sequence. I know this is a little confusing, but now you can see that we have our sequence and our source. So this is the actual program monitor. But if we wanted to start editing this footage, and you can see that it's green here, that green indicates that it's a multicam file and that it's a little bit special. What we can do is we can double click on that and go to our source monitor. And so already you can see that these are lined up. Okay, and so you can see that those are all looking pretty good, and you can see we have two different boxes, and you can click on them, and it looks like you're all set, but this can be really frustrating if you don't know the trick. Although it looks like you're ready here, what you actually have to do is come back out to your program monitor and click on this wrench in the bottom hand corner and turn on multi-camera. If you don't do this, it won't work. You can click back and forth all you want, but it won't make a difference. You have to come over and turn on multi-camera editing, and you have to do it while you're in the program monitor. But now once we come back into the source monitor, you see it's not here, but that's okay because now this should work just fine, and we can actually edit in our program monitor. So let's come to the beginning of our footage, and we can just play through some of it really quick. So this is me getting started. I think I mess up once before I even say anything. Okay, so I skipped through some of that there, but I finally found the point where I actually got my intro portion correct. So I'm just going to trim our footage down to this area because we only really care about this. So I'll just move that to the beginning, and then this is where I actually get my intro right. So now you can see we're in the program monitor. We have this all set up. We clicked on the wrench. We got our multi-camera source sequence going. So now what I'm going to do is come up and select our program monitor here, and I'm going to press this button. I don't know its name, but it's just below the escape key. And what that does is if you click that, or if you press that, it full screens whatever area you're looking at. So you can click anywhere and you can make that full screen. It's really useful for playing back stuff. So I'm going to make that full screen so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. And then let's start editing this. So we'll just go through really quick and see what we get.
Hey everybody, I'm Cassidy, and welcome to another Phillipian tutorial. This tutorial is all about multi-camera editing. So as you can tell, right now I'm shooting with two different cameras.
So you can see I'm clicking back and forth, and as I hit play, it starts to record where my edits are. And if we come back out here, you can see that it has made those cuts.
This tutorial is all about multi-camera editing. So as you can tell, right now I'm shooting with two...
Okay, this is pretty cool, but let's say you got one of your transitions just a little bit off. So say right here, I wanted to... I look away a little too soon, and I'd like to move that transition forward a little bit so that my camera doesn't lag so far behind. I can just go in there and click it again, and you can see that this moved up into the proper place. So it's a really fluid process, and no more do you have to kind of mess around with having multiple tracks on multiple layers. Now it's just a very fluid process. You can see as I scrub through, these cameras change alongside my scrub. And so you can see what you're doing at all times, which is really pretty useful. But say, for example, you had a lot more cameras for some reason, or maybe somebody kept turning their camera on and off, and it created many different files. What you can do to deal with that is come over to the wrench and say Edit Cameras. And so in this space, you can turn your different cameras on and off. Say I turn this camera off, and I no longer see it in my viewing monitor anymore, and I can come back and turn it back on, and there it is again. But say you had maybe 15 cameras, it'd be pretty hard to tell them apart, especially if a lot of them were black, because they were sunk with the footage, but they're not as long as other pieces, and so there's parts that they're missing, and you just want to get that out of there to clear up space. But I always recommend that you record straight through so that you don't have difficult problems like that with not having enough footage. If your SD cards aren't big enough, I'd recommend getting bigger SD cards, because it's just going to make your life a lot easier not having to deal with dozens of different clips that you have to sync up in post. It just makes things a lot more complicated. Okay, but let's just keep going through this a little bit more, and just kind of keep in mind as you're doing this, I'll mute my computer. Keep in mind as you're doing this that just because you have the power to do a lot of edits very easily, it doesn't always mean that it's a good idea to just edit constantly. Although it's easy to do, you don't always need to do it a lot. People like to get acquainted with a certain image that they're looking at and don't always want to see jump cuts back and forth, although I am kind of doing them right now. Another thing to point out is that instead of just clicking between clips, you can also use the numbers. And so right now I'm on number 1 and I just click to number 2. And so those align with the clips that you have in your source sequence. So if you had 9 clips, say, or even 10, you can use 1 through 0 to address all of those different clips. And so this makes it really easy to just jump back and forth. I don't even have to use my mouse at all and edit the different parts. Now you can see my computer is starting to lag a little bit because it's having to render 2 files as opposed to 1. And that's okay, but it can be a little difficult for your computer. So if it's getting difficult for your computer to handle it, you can just pause the footage and allow it to catch up and then keep going. Hopefully it won't be too much of an issue. But now that you can see we've gone through this whole thing, and I've pretty much just edited my introduction already, and so I've done I've done a little bit of the work for my video already, and I won't have to do so much later. But you can see I have almost a dozen edits here, probably more, that I've made from the introduction, and it took the same time as the introduction itself. So it's a really fast process. You don't have to worry about juggling between clips constantly because you're able to just make these cuts and edits really easily. Okay, so really quick, I'll just do a few troubleshooting guides. If you say you made your source sequence here and the audio you have below isn't the audio that you'd like, the easiest way I've found to rectify this is, say you know that this camera, I know that from my experience, this camera is the one that has the audio I'd like to keep. I can just drag that source sequence in. This is just the regular footage, and I can just take the audio that's beneath it, the audio that is being used for this clip, and I can say synchronize audio. Once I do that, this audio has all been synchronized, and you can see that these aren't linked together, so I have to move these as well. And what I might actually do is take all of these and say unlink, and then take all of them and say group, and that'll group all of those into one file. So if I move that around, they'll all stay together. Perfect. That's just what I want. But now that these two audio tracks are sunk together, you can use whichever audio you want. So say I want to cut here, we can take this out, and now you can see that these audio tracks are perfectly aligned. So if you want to use different audio, that's just one really easy way that you can get the other audio, and you can come up here, right click, unlink, and just delete the video track so that you have the audio underneath, and then you could maybe mute this track so that you don't hear that audio and you only hear the audio that you want to hear. That's just an easy way to sync them up. Okay, but I think that about wraps it up. You know how to synchronize clips into a multicam sequence, and then you know how to use that multicam sequence in various ways, blowing up different monitors, as well as adding different audio tracks. So until next time, I'm Caston Day, and this has been Phillipian Video.